Welcome back to this week's episode of Unlocked. Today is, first off, I want to give like a little trigger warning because I never do this. I think just because I'm so used to trauma that I'm like, oh, normal. But it's not. So just a little trigger warning. If you have endured any kind of abuse in your life, sexual abuse, domestic violence, this may not be the episode for you, or if you're on your healing journey and think this could help you, this could actually be the episode for you. So I want to introduce Ashley Taylor-Maland. Welcome.
Thank you.
And for people, you may recognize her, you may not. You may be like, where do I know that face from? Well, I saw her on TikTok and her TikTok went viral, and that's where I reached out to her and was like, I have to have you on my podcast. I want to hear your story. So I'm going to play the TikTok that I came across that inspired me to have her on.
You're gonna have to do what's best for you, even when it feels like shit. You have to understand that what you tolerate and allow in your life is what you will get. When someone shows you who they are, when someone shows you that they don't care, when someone manipulates you, when someone is back and forth with you, hot and cold with you, whatever the circumstances may be, walk away. Do what you have to do. And it's not going to feel good. It's going to hurt because there's a bond there. There's some sort of bond there. I understand. But you have to. You have to. You can't continue to let people walk and stomp all over your heart and make you feel badly about yourself because they are unhealed. You can't do it. It's not fair to you. It's not even fair to them. Take a stand for yourself. Even when it hurts to let go, take a stand for yourself and walk away.
So, can you tell us what inspired that?
I can. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory first so that it makes more sense. But my first serious relationship, I was very young, and it ended up being a very abusive relationship. And I was also then, and I'm just going to graze over that for a second so I can get to the point of the video.
No, as much backstory as you want to give.
Okay. And I will. I'll do that too. But when I was 24, I was sexually assaulted. I never went and got therapy. I never did any of those things. And then I got married, and I realized many years into my marriage, all of these things were starting to get triggered. And I didn't know why. But long story short, I ended up getting divorced. And that video I made right after I had just started dating again, and realizing that I had this pattern of choosing abusive people. Like it was just for some reason, and I didn't know why. I didn't even realize it for a long time, but I kept picking the same kind of people for relationships. And that was like the moment that I realized I have to start choosing myself. Like I keep choosing people that don't love me. They don't care about me. They're abusive mentally, emotionally, verbally. And I keep sticking it out with them because I don't have the self-worth to know I deserve better. And so that was right after a breakup where I broke up with someone. I didn't even want to break up with him, even though all the red flags were there and he was not a very kind or good person. I still didn't want to break up with him, but I knew I had to. I had to.
What was holding you back from breaking up with him?
Because I had never healed any of the trauma from any of the previous relationships. Two, I didn't know any different. I really hadn't ever had like a truly healthy whole relationship, but I knew I deserved more. I just didn't know how to accept more. And it was hard for me to break up with him because the addiction was so intense to him. Like the ups and the downs, the hot and the cold, which is very psychological. We don't even realize how psychological that is more in it.
When he was good, he was great.
Amazing. And I loved that. And it was fun. And it was, passionate and all these things. And I wanted all of those things, but I wanted it with somebody who actually gave a shit about me, you know? And so that was like my first time like going, I have to like stand up for myself. I have to know who I am and what I want. I have to walk away from these things that constantly hurt me, these relationships that are hurting me, so that I can have better, so that I can and actually enjoy a relationship that's healthy. And it took a lot of work, and I've been working on it ever since. That was like 2 years ago now, but.
So when you did that video, like, I mean, it went viral. I think like 30 million people, something crazy.
Yeah.
How quickly did that happen? And what were you feeling when you saw that happening?
So I had been making TikTok videos a little bit right after my divorce, just like kind of trying to encourage people with the things that I probably needed to hear.
Yeah.
And just the things that I was experiencing. And that video I made that day, I was so upset, like fresh into the breakup, like just so upset. And I remember I made it just like I would any of my others. And then within like an hour, I was like, I got to go delete that, because I was crying and I was really embarrassed that I was crying. I'm like, nobody likes to see someone crying.
Well, hey, normally when people cry, they look crazy on social media. So you still looked like very peaceful and gorgeous. And so,
Well, I felt embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, that's the last thing I need to do is post a video of me crying for the whole world to see. So I immediately went, like an hour later, I was like, I'm going to delete it. So I went to go delete it, and it had over 100,000 views in an hour. And I was like, what is going on? So I kept it. I was like, I'll just keep it for a couple more hours and just see what happens. And then like within like 3 hours, it was like 500,000 views. And it just, the whole week, it just kept going and going, because I kept telling myself, oh, I'll delete it when. And I kept seeing it grow and grow. But the reason why I left it was because of the comments. There were so many people like, I needed to hear this. Oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't delete this. Yeah. Like it's actually helping people that I had no idea that it would help. And so I decided to leave it. And then, that catapulted everything on social media for me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I saw it and I was like, oh my, and I think the first time I saw it, it was like, I was going through some shit too. Yeah. And I'm like, it's exactly what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And even when it's tough, it can still be the right decision. Mm-hmm. And so when you were going through, I guess now, like going back to the beginning of your story of you were sexually assaulted, you have endured this abuse. What was this final straw where you were like, I have to get help for the things I've gone through?
My divorce really opened my eyes. Just seeing that I immediately went from being unhappy in a marriage and leaving to more toxic relationships. I knew like I have to heal this. I'm going to have to go back, because these things are affecting my decisions now. They're affecting my relationships now.
You have to live life in reverse sometimes.
Yes. And I didn't want to, but I knew that I'm just going to end up married and divorced again. I'm not going to, and I'm going to end up in another toxic relation, another abusive relationship. These relationships are going to look the same until I do the work to know that I actually want and deserve better. And so I did. I got into therapy after my divorce. All of it was being triggered in the marriage, but it was after the divorce where I really had to like sit with it by myself and just like, okay, this is here. And I don't feel valuable. I don't feel worthy. I don't like myself that much. I don't feel like there's a purpose for my life. Sometimes I don't even want to be here, and I have to heal those parts of me. Because you can't get into a healthy relationship with someone when you're that broken. Like you can't even see healthy for what it is.
Yeah, and you have to, in a way, take accountability for why I'm at where I'm at.
Yeah.
And it's not even that everything had been done to you.
Yeah.
But then you got so comfortable in just living in it that you're like, all right, I've got to get out.
Yeah.
Like you have to kind of take yourself out of the situation and kind of look over it and say, like, would I want this for my child?
Exactly.
Would I want this? And the answer is no.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the other thing. I have a daughter, and I thought to myself, I don't ever want her to look at my relationships and them be unhealthy and her to think that's what it's supposed to look like. I can't let her become a teenager and an adult and end up in the same types of relationships I'm in because it's what she saw and thought was normal. Like I can't let that happen. She deserves to see me happy, so she knows that she deserves to be happy too. And so that was a big motivator. And there were times, in the last couple of years where I really was like fairly suicidal, and just like when you do like the deep shadow work, like you have to go so far in there and it's hard.
You have to start from day one, which is a lot of people aren't prepared for that. Like if you don't have the right team around you, It's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And so when you started that process, did you have a team around you?
At the time, I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I acquired people over the last couple of years that have ended up being like such a foundational presence in my life, like one of my friends here. But at that point, in the beginning of it, I didn't have that. Like my family and I were a bit estranged at the time because I was getting divorced, and that wasn't what anyone wanted for me. And so it was kind of a struggle. And I had to have grace for them and their beliefs and understanding of that, but also know that like I have to do this for me, and it's not going to make sense to you. And I hate that. And I hate that it's, going to put a wedge in our relationship, but I'm still going to do it.
That had to have been extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I hear so many stories of people in that same space.
Yeah.
And people who then don't even go forward with a divorce because of their family.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give people who are in that space?
Well, look, I'm not like everyone needs to get a divorce. Like if you're unhappy, just get divorced. Like I fully believe in commitment and, working through the hard times. But I also think that sometimes we do marry the wrong person. And I know that that's not like a very, I'm a Christian. I grew up as a Christian.
It's not popular opinion.
It's not a popular opinion. I get that, and that's okay. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not. But I think sometimes we do marry the wrong person for us. And when you have done absolutely everything you know how to do, like every possible thing that is on the table to make something work, and it's still not working, I think it's okay to say, okay, like I'm going to choose myself now. And and the problem is too, and I think you can relate to this, and many women can relate to this, and men too, but when you have given everything you can and none of it has worked and you have lost yourself entirely, you finally just get to a point where you either just give up on life and yourself, or you have to make the choice to go, okay, I don't know what this is going to look like. It's going to suck. It's going to hurt. It's going to be hard. I'm going to have to figure this out by myself. And I may have no support system, but I deserve to at least try. I deserve to at least see what life could possibly look like if I just tried and chose myself for once,
And what did that process from like the day, I guess, you filed for divorce, like what did that process look like for you of having a family who didn't necessarily support that decision just due to their own beliefs?
Right.
And then, how did you do it?
I just went at it alone, and I accepted that I was going to have to do it alone. And I told myself, you know what? There's something good in this. Like I was a people pleaser my entire life. I was codependent my entire life in friendships and romantic relationships and family dynamics. Like I depended on others for approval to be who I am and to do what I wanted to do. And so I finally had to go, okay, you know what? This is actually a good thing. I get to live my life on my own terms now, and it's going to get lonely. It's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. But if I don't have anyone else to rely on, I'm going to have to learn to rely on myself. And it was actually probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, honestly.
I love that. I say, like, you learn some of your biggest life lessons in the worst of times.
Yeah.
Like you find out what you're capable of, and you see the things that you've always needed to see. And sometimes it just takes that really tough thing.
It does.
This episode of Unlocked is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. What is something, if you could, if I'm you 2-3 years ago, what is something you would say to yourself then?
Oh, that's good. I would say it's not going to look anything like you think it is, but every single part of this journey is creating who you're meant to be. You'll find your purpose in it. You'll find your strength in it. You'll find the resilience that you didn't know you had in it. And you will become something way more than you ever even knew you were valuable enough to be. Like, I genuinely didn't have any of that confidence, but I do now. Like, I feel really good about where I am, and I'm still working on it. We're all a work in progress. Yeah. We're always learning and healing and growing, and that's just life. It'll always look that way, but I know that I've changed in the decisions I make and the way I respond to the difficult things now. And I feel really good about that.
I love that. I think too, it's just the living life in reverse. Like, you have to.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, especially through therapy, you learn, like, you have to live life in reverse in order to go forward.
Yeah.
And so where would you say you're at now in that living life in reverse process? Have you started your living life forward?
Yeah.
Or
100%. I would say the last 2 years I was in the reverse part. Having to go back, having to sit with the really, really hard, uncomfortable stuff. To be honest, and I don't know if anyone really knows this, I didn't even consider my sexual assault for years, because I couldn't even think about it. I couldn't even allow myself to go back and think about it. So for a long time, it was just kind of an ordeal that happened.
I can't imagine how, like, invalidating that was for you.
It was because, and anyone who's a survivor of that knows, there is so much shame. Like, I felt disgusting. Like, I felt so embarrassed by what had happened to me, even though it happened to me and there was nothing, it was out of my control. Like, so for so long, I couldn't think about it. I couldn't sit with it.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 24.
24?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, I'll talk about it. I've never talked about this publicly.
Well,
but
don't feel like you have to.
No, I don't. But I think it's important for young girls, especially, like, because I was 24 in the college age years. I met this guy who was a foreign exchange student. He was amazing. I thought it was so fun. We went out. We had drinks. Another thing I blamed myself for was drinking and putting myself in that position, which is one of the things that people always say. And anyway, we went out. Went to a party, or so it was supposed to be a party, and there ended up being no one there. And at that point, I was like trapped, and I kept trying to get away and leave, and he just, at some point just held me down, and that was that. But I remember leaving that night. It was like the middle of the night. I walked home, and I remember just being in shock. I was in shock.
Yeah. And
I never thought about it or talked about it again until like probably the last couple of years in therapy. Like, I just didn't, it was just one of those things that I was just like, I can't even, like, mentally or emotionally keep going if I don't just put it here and just not ever think about it again.
And when you did that, did you feel like part of you, in a way, like, just died?
Oh, 100%.
And then you're just operating out of this, like, robotic kind of way throughout life.
I literally, after that, I stopped dating. I just completely, like, separated myself from men for a long time, which makes sense. It wasn't an intentional thing. I just kind of...
Your body, your body keeps the score. Like, your body just automatically does things that you don't understand why it's doing what it's doing. But it's your body's way of protecting itself, which is totally normal and totally... Your body has to protect. That's what your body was put here for, was to protect yourself.
That's right. It totally is. Yeah. So, I think that...
And how old are you now?
38.
38. Yeah. Okay. So that happened at 24. So it took you a while to...
Yeah.
And would you say that, and obviously we won't go too much into it, but that had a negative impact on your marriage and
100%.
How you reacted and did certain things?
Yeah, because there's so much there. Like, you don't realize, like you had said, you don't understand the effects of the trauma on your body and your mind and your psyche.
Oh, there's an actual study, and I forgot what it's called, but you go, it's like this testing, and you go through and you answer all these questions, and it's like, have you ever been sexually abused? Have you ever had any like verbal abuse, a parent incarcerated, all these different like little questions that ask you. And if you answer yes to X amount of questions, you're more likely to have Alzheimer's. You're more likely to suffer from diabetes, from all these true health problems within your body. More likely to have cancer, more likely, like trauma actually does affect your body at a cellular level.
It really does. Yeah, it's incredible. And I think that was what happened with me too. I never sat with it. I never dealt with it. It was in my body all those years. And so all of a sudden I started getting extremely depressed, extremely anxious, not even knowing what the correlation was, struggling in my marriage, struggling to connect with people. It wasn't until, like I said, a couple years ago in therapy and then having to sit with all those things where I was like, oh my God, like, and I feel like a different person.
Yeah.
Like I feel lighter. I feel happier. I feel more joyful. I feel less afraid. I feel a little bit more trusting in some scenarios and like than I did for so long. Like I don't feel like I'm completely just closed off.
And what would you say, what advice would you give to a woman or girl that finds herself in the same position you were at 24?
Get help immediately. Like get therapy immediately. Tell someone you love that you're close to immediately. Like don't keep it to yourself. And also don't let the shame of it keep you from telling your story. And don't let the shame of it keep you from ever finding love again too, because that can happen as well.
And I think too, just the amount of sexual assaults that are unreported. I mean, it's astronomical because so many women are afraid to go to the police, to say this happened to me, because that can be a very traumatic experience as well.
Yeah.
And did the person that did it to you, have you had your moment of kind of taking your power back with that person?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I don't know. I don't even remember his name. Like I remembered like, I don't know, a year ago or so, I started thinking about that. And I was like, I wonder where that person ever went. Or he was from Ireland. And so I imagine he's back there now. And I couldn't tell you anything about him. And that
is totally normal.
Yeah.
Too. That is once again like your body's way of protecting yourself.
Yeah.
Is just mentally and emotionally just blocking everything out.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a wild, wild thing. But in some ways, and I don't know what the right answer is for this, because I've seen women that have come out like many years later. And of course, there's always the people like, if that really happened, why didn't they say it a long time ago? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. But but for me, I don't know that it would empower me at this point in my life. I would rather, now that I've sat with it and healed from it, I don't want to go back. And I'm not saying that's what every woman should do. I always advocate if something ever happened for you and you feel like that's what you need, do it. Turn him in. And I wish I could turn him in. I don't even know his last name,
like in that moment. And that's the biggest thing is like, call anyone that this happens to, like something happens to you, go to the police, turn them in. Like, obviously you're more likely to get punishment for that person when you do it in the moment and there's evidence and unfortunately that's so unfortunate because it's like if you don't do it that moment, the studies and stats show the chances of being able to convict someone of that is very slim.
Very, very slim. So, even in the moment. Yeah. A lot of the times, if it's not like irrefutable, a lot of times nothing will happen either. And I think a lot of women have went forward, but didn't receive the response that they thought they would get in a moment like that, where they thought, I can go to the cops and I'm going to be fine. They went and were questioned, like thoroughly questioned when they were already sitting in a traumatizing moment of something that's happened to them. And so it can be really difficult to go forward as well. But I do still think you should try, like if you can.
Yeah, because I think too, and it's like you said, you're like, I don't even know if that would do anything for me at the place you're at now.
Yeah.
I've heard so many people that have whether they've gotten an apology or they've confronted the person and they're like, I thought it was going to do all these things and I thought I was going to leave feeling like I'm on top of the world.
Yeah.
And they're like, I left feeling angrier than when I went in because it didn't do what I thought it was going to do.
I can say with my abuser when I was young, I don't think it would make any difference to me if he apologized or said sorry or, reached out. I wouldn't even really want to respond.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing, I have healed so thoroughly from that. At this point, there's no need for me to ever open that door again or get any sort of, I don't even know what the word would be, validation, I guess, that acknowledgement that what he did was awful. Like, I don't think it would even do anything for me anymore. I actually kind of feel sympathy for him, really.
Wow.
But
and to see like how far you've come in that, isn't it such a crazy thing to like look at where you were then versus now?
Yeah.
And the things you're able to say.
Yeah.
And so where would you say now, like relationally with, because so many women, men, people find themselves just dating the same person over and over again with just similar traits, or where do you find yourself now in that phase of like breaking the cycle of the people that you have relationships with?
Yeah. I took a long time away from it. It's been like a year and a half now of just like fully investing in myself and my healing. And I needed that. And I think that there is healing work that can only be done in a season of solitude. And then there's healing work that can only be done when you get back into relationships that are healthy for you. And I'll get there, I'm sure, but I'm not worried about it right now. I will say that for like anyone who's listening and they're just like, I'm broken, I keep ending up in these toxic relationships, I do think that is the moment when you have to step back from it and you have to get to the core of it, because ultimately getting abused is not your fault.
Yeah.
But you get a choice to stay in those relationships or not. It is your choice to stay or go. And you have to know the signs. Like, first of all, you have to know what the red flags are. I didn't know what those were when I was young.
Because those were normal to you.
They were normal to me. I had no idea. Now I do. So going into a relationship now is going to look very different for me. I'm not going to interrogate someone, but I also see the signs and I go, oh, you know what? I'm actually not interested.
I'm good.
I'm good, actually. Thank you. Versus before it was like a curiosity of like, oh, that was weird that they did that. I wonder why. Maybe something bad happened to them, or maybe I triggered them, or maybe I did something wrong,
You took on responsibility for things
100%
that were not for you to take responsibility for.
And now it's like, no, I'm a pretty decent person. And so, that little thing you just did a minute ago it's just not something I want in a relationship. And it's not personal. I'm just not going to go down that road. But also just getting comfortable with being alone and getting so sure of who you are, what you want, but also what you need to feel loved, I think is really, really important.
I love that. And so what is next on your journey of, because obviously you've gotten a lot of social media attention and followers, and just because your truth has truly helped so many people along their journey.
Yeah.
So what is next for you in that?
Honestly, my entire goal for my entire life, for the rest of my life, is to just keep encouraging women and men to avoid unhealthy relationships and to find themselves and to choose themselves and to invest in themselves and to know their value. And that's all I want to do. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm not sure I care, as long as it's helping someone else, my story and my journey, as long as people are, breaking free from toxicity and abusive relationships and, finding grace for themselves in divorce because of the status quo of that. That's all I hope for. And I hope it builds something incredible, and we'll see where God takes it. I don't know, but that's my goal. I want to build a community of people that can encourage each other and support one another and give each other that grace and love that they needed, Well,
that's what I say. It was like Dr. Cohen, who came on right before you, we were talking about just how there's this artist who did this sculpture, and I had told him that you have these two adults that are like sitting back to back in the sculpture, and then inside of them are two children like fighting to get out. And so it's like we all have that inner child that has gone through trauma and abuse and whatever it may be. And the sooner we realize that about each other, the more empathy and grace you can have for each other.
Oh, so true.
And that's just really where I just think that's what this is all about, is in your story and your videos. And it just gives people that little bit.
Yeah.
You're being what you wish you would have had.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And that's why when I saw your video, I was like, I have to have her on here. I was like, I feel like so many people need to hear this. People need to hear your story and what you've gone through, and that there is life on the other side.
There is.
Because there's no way you could have imagined your life being what it is now. 10 years ago.
No, if you had told me even 2 years ago, I'd have been like, "What? You're insane! Like that is not what this is going to look like."
And so, what advice would you give people who are just struggling to get out?
Oof. That get comfortable with it being painful in that moment. Accept the pain. Accept that it's going to hurt right now. Like, it's so hard to break free from those patterns. It is so hard to step outside of addictive relationships and toxic relationships and truly dive into yourself, because you have to sit in the hurt and the pain and the unworthiness that you feel. But it hurts no matter what. It hurts to stay, and it hurts leaving. But at least when you leave, it's a temporary pain, because there is hope on the other side of that. When you stay in an abusive relationship, there is no hope. It doesn't change. It doesn't get better. Like, that pain continues. Yes.
You have to live with, but at least when you leave, you have uncertainty.
Yes.
And there are times where I bet uncertainty is more comfortable than knowing what's coming next.
Yeah. You can't heal in an abusive relationship, but you can heal when you finally get out of one.
I love that. So where can people follow you and follow along your story and your journey? And
yeah. So I have a website, thisiswhereweheal.com. That is also the name of my podcast. Thisiswhereweheal.com. But, and then, Ashley Taylor-Maland on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So Maland.
I know. I was like, how do I say this? Like, there's not a Y on
Maland,
it.
but it's Maland, but it's like Maland. So Ashley Taylor-Maland. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making the trip to come on the podcast, and just your story I feel like can change millions of people's lives.
I hope so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.